Okay, today we are visiting the Samuel Alexander Cobean farm, which was a field hospital for Ewell's Corps here during the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Samuel Alexander Cobean was born on July 31st, 1804. In the 1860 census, it shows that he lived in this structure that we're looking at in front of us with Elizabeth Cobean. Now, a little bit about the house. It is the only Gregorian-style farmhouse within the Gettysburg National Military Park, and it is one of the oldest brick structures in Adams County. Due to its size, it is somewhat atypical of the average Pennsylvania farmhouse, and its architectural features are unlike those of any houses in this area. The house and the barn are the only two remaining Civil War structures that are on the property. This structure was built in 1805 by David Dunwoody, who sold the farm to Samuel Alexander Cobean. Now, as you know from videos in the past, David Dunwoody was a builder. He built the Dobbin House in 1775. This house and farm was set off of the main road, and it had a long dirt driveway, which still is a dirt driveway today. And as with many old houses, as you can see as we get closer to the house, trees were planted on both sides of the road. Only a few remain, which are probably Civil War trees, and they seem to be the Capulta tree. Some of them are barely alive, like this one up on the left. And then you got some very, very large trees as you get closer to the house. This was a typical of Civil War homes and southern plantations in the 19th and 18th centuries to line the road leading to the home or to the plantation with large trees. Some of Samuel's family was James H. Cobean, Robert Cobean, Elizabeth Smith, Alexander Cobean, Susanna Cobean, and Martha E. Cobean. Also in the 1860 census, it shows that Samuel Alexander Cobean owned real estate worth about $8,800 and personal estate of about $2,500 for a total of $11,300, which made him the 11th wealthiest person in Cumberland Township. Samuel would pass away on January the 20th, 1871. Now, a little bit about the Battle of Gettysburg that was fought around this house. During the fighting on July 1st, 1863, as Ewell's Corps became engaged, the Jeff Davis, or also Alabama Artillery, under the command of William Reese, brought three 3-inch rifles to a field of wheat on the high ground south of this house, or just to the left of our camera position. They opened fire on the 11th Corps troops about 1,500 yards south of this position along present-day Howard Avenue. And again on July 3rd of 1863, Confederate artillery prepared to fire from Seminary Ridge, or Oak Ridge, in the area of the Cobean farm toward Cemetery Hill. Union artillery returned fire, and a significant amount of their overshots landed on the Cobean farm and at this house. A few of the shells striking the house and the barn and killing some of the wounded. Now, 8 of Carter's Confederate guns were deployed at 2 points, about 50 yards from the Mummersburg Road, targeting McPherson's Woods and the railroad cut area, which enabled them to do enfilade fire on the 1st Corps in that area. 4 more of their guns were placed on the eastern slope of the ridge that targeted the 11th Corps troops. And the remaining 4 guns were placed here at the Samuel Cobean farm, just to the left of the house. When Union artillery fired back, the shots hit this barn, as well as the house. Now, of course, after the Battle of Gettysburg, this barn and home became field hospitals. In this barn and house, there were over 831 wounded men. With Carter's and Hill's batteries all playing on the enemy and in possession of Oak Hill, General Ewell decided to press the enemy. It was too late to avoid engagement without abandoning the position that was already taken. And General Ewell said that I determined to attack vigorously. The trees that you see here in front of us, as well as this dirt road, were all witnesses to this artillery fire on July 1st of 1863. Around 2 p.m. on July 1st of 1863, General Robert Rhodes began his assault on the 1st Corps line in earnest. From the start, the assault was fraught. He personally oversaw the layout of his attack on the 11th Corps. Arriving north of the town, he decided to leave 4 regiments in charge by George Dole's brigade on the plain of the Carlisle Road. When Ewell's 2nd Division, which was Early's division, arrived on the field, it would act as a link between the 2 2nd Corps divisions. The main attack would take place utilizing the brigades. 4 North Carolina regiments under Brigadier General Alfred Iverson would advance from the John Forney Farm, while Rhodes' former brigade under Colonel Edward O'Neill, the 26th Alabama, would attack 4 regiments. Now, briefly, we're going to talk about the spring in this marshy area here. This spring was not only used as hospital purposes, but for at least one Gettysburg civilian named John F. McKentrick. It was used to help the wounded and the fighting on July 1st, 1863. And on July 2nd, 1863, McKentrick took dozens of canteens filled with water from this spring and went back to the fighting along Oak and Seminary Ridge and gave this fresh water to Confederate soldiers. Just as the Union Army was given help by John Burns, the Confederate Army was given help by J.F. McKentrick. This is the north side of the house, in which sustained some damage during the Battle of Gettysburg, most likely on July 1st of 1863. But most of the damage would be on the south side of the home. And again, just as John Burns joined Stone's brigade on July 1st, McKentrick was accepted into Kemper's Virginia Brigade. McKentrick would later write that he followed the Virginians from Cashtown and then joined the ambulance corps in caring for the wounded, and that he was also an eyewitness to Pickett's charge, and he remained on the field until July 4th, when he returned home. Surgeon John M. Hayes of the 26th Alabama Infantry said on July 3rd that he was in conversation with 2 wounded soldiers when McKentrick appeared on the scene. He said, "The big boy took too much a bottle of whiskey and 2 large slices of bread and some butter and handed it to us, and each of us got a drink. We haven't seen as such bread and fresh butter or tasted good whiskey in some time, and I can appreciate the effect of such a lunch." McKentrick did such a fine job at aiding, feeding, and assisting wounded soldiers that when he entered the camp of Kemper's brigade near Marsh Creek, he became an honorary Confederate, though he clearly ministered impartiality from men on both sides. Now, J.F. McKentrick was from the town of Ebensburg, Pennsylvania. And of course, he would return there after the Civil War and after the Battle of Gettysburg. As we look south now, we're looking in the direction of the field, the wheat field on a hill, where both Jeff Davis Artillery and Carter's Battery were placed facing Oak Ridge and Barlow's Knoll. These were those batteries that were here on this farm that had fired in those directions at Union soldiers. To the left of us would have been the Carlisle Road and also the charge of Dole's Georgia Brigade. Because of this, those 1st and 11th Corps artillery pieces would fire back in this direction, and this is why this farm sustained the damage that it did, especially on July 1st and 2nd of 1863. Now, we're going to take a look at the southern side and the southern wall of the Cobean house. And this is the area that would have sustained most of the damage on July 1st and 2nd of 1863 from Union artillery firing into the farm. If you can imagine that Union artillery behind where our camera is, here is the southern wall of the house, and there in the distance you can also see the Cobean barn. It's hard to pick out today, but when you walk close to the house, you can see where there was battle damage that was repaired, where the brick was displaced. And again, as we zoom in here on this wall, this house was hit several times, some of the shells going through the house. And again, this was used as a Confederate field hospital after the Battle of Gettysburg, and there were over 800 men that were wounded in and around this house, suffering in the days after the Battle of Gettysburg. Not only was this a Confederate hospital, but a Confederate hospital flag flew above the barn. And one of the more famous Confederate generals was actually here. On July 3rd, 1863, during the action that we know as Pickett's Charge or Longstreet's Assault, General Isaac Trimble was atop of his horse, Jenny, when he and the horse were both struck. Though he was able to come down from the horse and walk slightly back, he was removed from the battlefield, and he was first brought to this home. When he got here, his leg was amputated by Dr. Hunter McGuire, who was Thomas Stonewall Jackson's surgeon. Hunter McGuire and some staff amputated, and then he was moved from this house to the McMurdy house on Chambersburg Street on July 4th, and then later to the seminary where he recovered fully from his wounds. Then he was taken to Baltimore temporarily to be put in a prison camp. Joseph Francis McKendrick, who we know as J.F. McKendrick or John McKendrick, I've heard it be used, he passed away in 1913. He was buried in the new Catholic cemetery in Ebensburg, PA. And again, that's the spring that he used to help and aid Confederate soldiers. And again, as we leave the house and we pass by the barn one more time, you can only imagine the things that happened in and around this farm and property. It still looks pretty much today like it did during the American Civil War. The dirt roads leading from the Carlisle Pike, these very old Capulta trees that have got very large trunks. A few of them have to be from the Civil War time. So again, today's video is on the Samuel Cobean farm, which today is used as park offices for the Gettysburg National Military Park, as well as a place to store plaques, cannon, and monuments from the Gettysburg battlefield days past. I am Frank Patrick Marone Jr., your historian, and this has been the Samuel Cobean Farm here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. And as always, I thank you for watching this video. Please check out our page on Truth Social at Gettysburg Battlefield Truth, and also which there will be links to my YouTube page. This has been the Samuel Cobean Farm on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours.